amazing what else is left out. The discussion of inventions is basically like a one-sentence thing. Talk about inventions from all times. Can you tell me which inventions are going to be covered in every classroom when you say it that way? Can you tell me which important American inventions, again, which gets into the American exceptionalism story, are going to be mentioned? You see, that they never mention Alexander Graham Bell or the telephone. They never mention one of my favorite safety engineers, a guy named George Westinghouse, who invented the air brakes, which made rail travel much safer and which are still used on trucks today, by the way. They never mention Thomas Edison, who created motion pictures and electric lighting and a whole host of other important inventions. Morse and his telegraph weren't mentioned. The Wright brothers and their important discoveries. And that's another American exceptionalism story. Two bicycle mechanics beat some of the most sophisticated and well-financed technical engineers in the country under Dr. Langley, who were given $50,000 by the US government to develop an airplane, and the Wright brothers beat them to the punch. In fact, Langley never did discover the key element, which the Wrights did, to the fact that you need 3 axes of control to keep an airplane under control in flight, not 2, you need 3. And Langley never discovered that, so he never had a practical design. All of those stories are totally omitted because neither the inventions nor the inventors are mentioned. That's very sad. It robs our children of the assurance they will learn about important parts of our history. The other stuff that's missing, unbelievable. There are very few wars mentioned in this document. There are some. They mention the American Revolution and the Civil War is mentioned, and World War I and World War II get coverage, and so does the Spanish-American War. But there isn't anything said about the War of 1812. There isn't anything said about the Mexican-American War or the Texas War of Independence. And in a great shock to me, because I'm a Vietnam War vet, and to other vets who are still living for the most part, not one single war after World War II is ever mentioned. Wow. In fact, the country of Vietnam and many other countries, in fact, the entire continent of South America is ignored, not mentioned. What kind of a social studies education is that? Some examples of how this country expanded. We did some unique things in this country. We didn't get all of our land through war and conquest. In fact, a lot of it was obtained through peaceful purchase and negotiation with other countries. The Louisiana Purchase, a huge expansion of our land, was peaceful. It was a purchase. The Alaska Purchase, peaceful. The Gadsden Purchase, we needed a way around the mountains out west for a railroad. We did that peacefully with Mexico instead of fighting them for it. We paid them for it. Those are all peaceful expansions, and none of them are mentioned, and neither is the Lewis and Clark expedition, which is a fantastic story, another American exceptionalism story. There's nothing about them either, which of course was a consequence of the Louisiana Purchase. We needed to find out what we really had bought. Things hadn't been very well surveyed back then. All of that is gone. It's not mentioned anywhere. The stuff that's mentioned is so brief and incomplete, it just makes you weep. Some of the people that are left out are unbelievable. Now, a state with really high quality standards is Massachusetts. And I went through a listing of people who are mentioned in there, and there are a lot of them. They were able to make a decision about who's really important and who kids need to learn about. Our teachers who created our social studies standards weren't willing to make those decisions. But I already mentioned a couple of them. Some of the great industrialists like Andrew Carnegie and Cornelius Vanderbilt, they're mentioned in Massachusetts. They're not covered at all. And others. Harriet Tubman's not mentioned, for goodness sakes. And John Dewey, who was very influential in education. He's not mentioned in Kentucky standards. And it goes on like that. Benjamin Franklin's not mentioned in Kentucky standards.
Whoa.
What kind of a civics lesson are we going to give our kids when we don't give them the surrounding history about how our government was formed and who did it?
Right.
That's what's missing in this vacuous,
you
horrible
said,
document.
And you mentioned, you said American exceptionalism, but what I also heard was free markets, entrepreneurs, how valuable that is to how we created one of the wealthiest, most prosperous societies ever.
I agree. Let me give you some terms that kind of go counter to that to get back to the civics lesson that
Sure.
you just triggered my mind on. How are you going to really teach American children the full story about our way of life, which includes capitalism that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and totally ignore, are you ready for this? Socialism, communism, and even Nazism.
Yes.
None of those terms appear in this document anywhere.
Whoa. No.
You want to talk about a cover-up and an
Right.
inexcusable piece of work. This is it. Who are these people? How could anyone feel they were competent to create something when they created this? I'm sorry, they weren't.
Right. No.
There is no mention of those things. Those are critical things our kids need to know about. And a lot of our young adults now do not fully understand the dangers of communism and socialism. And a lot of them think, oh, we ought to do that. Well, by golly, there's a lot of people who emigrated here from Russia who would say not only no, but heck no. And ditto for anybody who emigrated from any of the other satellite countries or other areas of the world that have been under the communist thumb. But our kids are ignorant, and they're going to stay ignorant if this document isn't changed.
Yes. Let me say this real quick. Let me say this real quick before we continue. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. We have with us today Mr. Richard Ennis of the Bluegrass Institute. Brother, I called you Roy Ennis. You know who I was thinking about when I called you Roy Ennis, old school civil rights guy. But this is Richard Ennis with the Bluegrass Institute, Book Talk with Corbin. Folks, I have another interview with this gentleman at my website. It's posted on my website, booktalkwithcorbin.com. You definitely have to go to that interview, listen to that, and then come back to this. And if you don't come back concerned, then I can't help you. So I don't know what else we could say. I don't know what else we can say. Brother, before we stop here, could you talk a little bit about the Bluegrass Institute? I've heard about them for a while, but I didn't know a lot about them.
I'd be glad to do that. Bluegrass Institute is Kentucky's first and most prominent free market think tank. We like to look at ideas from the private sector and also from other states, even in the public sector, that are working well for those institutions and that we think could also work well to guide our public policy here in Kentucky to make Kentucky a better place for all of us to live and work. And we bring that intelligence together. We have a number of scholars who support us, a number of economists from around the state, and educators. Dr. Gary Houchins is an educator who is one of our scholars, and Dr. John Guerin, who's a very noted economist at the University of Kentucky, for example, is another one of our scholars. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I do a lot of work and research, and we have a really gifted team of staff members who are experienced in public policy and in assisting legislators in developing better public policy. And our job is to come up with suggestions to improve Kentucky for everyone. And that's our primary mission. We're totally non-government funded. We don't take a penny of government money. So we're not beholden to anybody in the state or federal government who would influence our thought processes or try to limit what we do. We are very independent that way. We do accept private donations, and we certainly need them to survive. And if
Yes.
anybody's interested, we're always happy to receive that help.
What's your website?
It's www.B as in boy, I as in India, P as in Papa, another P as in Papa, S as in Sierra.org. It's bips.org.
Okay.
And you'll be able to find a lot of information there, giving information and so forth. We have a blog. We have lots of reports that we've issued. And I think all of that is available pretty easily to the public. And certainly we like to hear from the public. If they have questions, oftentimes that will aim us in a new direction that we want to examine. We appreciate the feedback.
Can people make a donation at the website?
I believe there is a feature right in the website to do that.
All right.
And if not, there should be contact information where they can find out more.
And I'm assuming that if someone wants to donate $5 million, $5,000, or $5, they're free to do it. However much they can afford.
We will take any donation people are willing to give us. Obviously, the more the better, but there's no donation too small. We're happy to receive whatever people can support us with.
Yeah, fantastic. Brother, we need to conclude here. Thank you so much for coming back a second time. I really appreciate you. And please contact me if you've got something that you really would like to, share with my listeners.
I'll put a teaser out there. We have a major problem with reading in this state. We've done a lot of research on it, and we've just discovered some examples of a school district in Kentucky that is producing phenomenally high reading scores on the state's K-Prep test, although they have phenomenally high poverty. And if you get me back another time, we want to talk about that story because it says that, yes, Kentucky, we can do better. We don't have to settle for this. We don't have to accept the argument that, oh, we're too poor, our kids will never perform. Right. It's happening right now, right here in the Bluegrass state. We just have to get more people on board with it.
That's fantastic. That's a great teaser, brother. We're definitely going to make that arrangement for that interview on that subject. Brother, thank you so much. Let's stay in touch.